Long overdue. That sounds fantastic. Yeah, Billy.
Quality of the find based on Gary's Cheshire Cat grin.
I just wish I had a bigger top pocket.
For over 2 centuries, Oak Island has whispered to treasure hunters, promising riches buried deep beneath muddy layers of mystery. From pirate gold to royal jewels to ancient religious relics, every theory has only fueled the fire. Generations have come and gone, explorers have dug and drilled, and millions of dollars have been spent. Yet the heart of the island refused to give up its secrets. But today, everything changes. According to shocking new updates, Rick Lagina, the quiet, determined soul at the center of this legendary quest, has finally confirmed that treasure has been discovered inside the Money Pit Tunnel. That's right, the very spot where the original search began in 1795, when 3 young boys stumbled upon mysterious logs and a hidden shaft, is now, at long last, revealing what's been protected for more than 200 years. The excitement on the island is unlike anything the team has ever felt. As the drill bit cut deeper into the ancient structure, strange timbers appeared. Then metal, then fragments that no one could identify. Rick himself was reportedly speechless, staring into the dark void beneath his feet, where the impossible was unfolding. Some say, he whispered, "We're here. We finally made it." And this is only the beginning, because what they found next may rewrite everything we thought we knew about Oak Island and the treasures that shaped history. Before we continue deeper, hit that subscribe button at lightning speed so you don't miss a single discovery on this wild journey. The journey began quietly in the late autumn of 2024, when cold winds swept across Oak Island and coated the Money Pit in a thin layer of gray mist. For weeks, Rick Lagina and his team had been running controlled scans along a narrow tunnel beneath the old shaft, reviewing signal readings that rarely showed more than scattered minerals or stray pockets of void. But then, on a calm evening, around 6:45 p.m., something changed. A reading pulsed on the monitor, unlike anything they had ever seen. Its metallic signature was sharp, steady, and buried nearly 188 feet below the surface, far deeper than previous structures. At first, it seemed like any other anomaly, just a flicker in the soil. But as the data continued to stream in, the signal revealed dimensions, nearly 3.2 meters wide, and a density pattern that suggested worked material rather than natural metal. Rick leaned close, studying the numbers with the kind of quiet intensity that had drawn him to Oak Island decades earlier. This wasn't just coincidence. It felt deliberate, as if something long hidden was calling out. He signaled the crew to run a more detailed scan. When they did, the result tightened their chests. The target gave off faint reflections resembling compartments or reinforced surfaces. No scattered fragments, no random debris. This meant structure. This meant purpose. Rick stood silently for a moment, imagining the countless explorers before him who had chased rumors and failed. Yet here, at the edge of a tunnel few dared to excavate, the mystery seemed to open itself for the first time. Day after day, the team monitored the zone, marking each shift in the reading. A tiny gold trace registered on the analyzer, no bigger than a grain, yet pure enough to suggest a source untouched for centuries. The island, which for more than 229 years had swallowed tools, timber, wealth, and hope, suddenly felt strangely alive. Rick thought of the original discovery in 1795, when three young men dug into this very region after seeing strange lights and found layered platforms every 10 feet. The memory of that tale seemed to run parallel with the new numbers glowing on the screen. Convinced, Rick proposed a targeted micro-dig. It would be slow, careful, and measured, a surgical approach to avoid damaging whatever lay beneath. The crew prepared narrow drill casings, their breaths sharp in the cold morning. Every centimeter mattered. Every moment felt heavy. They advanced only a few inches each hour, recording soil composition, water pressure, and vibration strength. When fragments finally surfaced, they were unlike anything previously recovered. Compacted wood fibers treated with pitch and thin metallic flecks embedded in the grain. Someone, long ago, had sealed these walls with intention, and they had lasted lifetimes. The evidence became undeniable. Something valuable had been placed deep inside this tunnel, shielded by clever engineering that defied centuries of decay. Rick felt the hum of discovery spreading through the underground air, as if the island itself was preparing to speak. The whisper that started as a curious signal transformed into a beckoning pathway, guiding the team forward into greater danger, greater history, and deeper promise, until the first drill broke through and their world shifted toward the next phase, where ancient materials, stone-lined pockets, and hidden structures emerged from the darkness, blending past and present as one continuous breath. The signal had already teased them with promise, but the true test began in the early morning of January 2025, when Rick Lagina and the crew committed to a precision dig straight into the Money Pit tunnel. This was not a reckless descent. Every move was measured, slow, and grounded in decades of lessons learned from Oak Island's unpredictable soil. The first drilling pass reached 191 feet, and immediately the pressure sensors warned of shifting layers, a reminder that this ground had consumed countless attempts before. Still, they pressed on, knowing they were closer than anyone in history. The crew installed reinforced steel casings to stop the tunnel walls from folding in. Even with the support, the cold earth groaned and vibrated under machinery, releasing ancient water that surged through old channels. Pumps roared for hours, pulling nearly 3,200 liters from a narrow void, preventing the tunnel from drowning their opportunity. The air below smelled of wet timber, wood that hadn't seen daylight in centuries. The structure felt alive, as if guarding its secret beneath layers of silence. Piece by piece, the drill began bringing up strange fragments. At 198 feet, thick, dark timbers resurfaced, cut, shaped, and stacked with precision. Their grain carried resin still hardened from the hands that built the chamber long ago. Testing revealed they were oak, harvested between 1490 to 1640 CE, far older than any known settlement in the region. Alongside them came small flakes of metal, not rusted to nothing as one might expect from centuries underground, but remarkably intact. Thin, controlled cuts hinting at purpose. Every sample told a story. Each sound of the drill echoed through the narrow shaft, like a heartbeat. Hope on every strike, fear in every vibration. This area had defeated some of the best mines since 1795, swallowing tools, flooding tunnels, collapsing walls. Rick knew a single miscalculation could end the mission, sealing the truth forever beneath stone and mud. But the data kept pushing them forward. Infrared scans detected a low, reflective chamber just ahead, nearly 4 meters long, suggesting more than random rock. Something lay waiting. By the third day, the temperature in the tunnel dropped sharply, signaling an air pocket below. The team slowed their pace, moving candlelight sensitive in their approach. Suddenly, the drill pierced a hollow space and shuddered. The debris it carried up was unlike anything they'd seen. Compacted soil wrapped around cloth fibers and tiny fragments of hammered metal. Rick ran his fingers across the cloth, still textured, as though only years old, not centuries. Their eyes met, silent but electric. These findings pushed them into the next phase without pause. The tunnel's breath grew colder, and the fragments more intricate. At 203 feet, the core sample pulled up crushed gemstones, tiny, green, and polished, just enough to hint at value without revealing their story. No one spoke. They simply stared at the unexpected colors resting in their palms. And just as the team steadied themselves for what would come next, the drill bit scraped against something perfectly smooth. Not wood, not stone, but a surface engineered long before their time. A threshold to another hidden chamber where truth and myth intertwined, urging them deeper as if guided by invisible hands, pulling them toward a realm where the impossible waited in silent darkness. The deeper they worked beneath the money pit, in early February 2025, the atmosphere inside the narrow tunnel felt unlike anything the crew had experienced before. The earth itself seemed to respond to their presence, exhaling cold breaths each time the drill advanced. At 204 feet, the soil composition shifted suddenly, revealing a strange pocket of densely compacted earth. When the sample tray lifted, it carried chips of metal that shone faintly beneath the work lights. These pieces were not weathered enough to have formed naturally, nor were they shaped by erosion. Instead, their smooth, curved edges suggested careful hands had shaped them centuries ago. A second core, pulled from 210 feet, was even more startling. Embedded in the wet silt were tiny shards of crushed gemstones, brilliantly green and deep red, their internal fractures too intentional to be dismissed as debris. The mineral report confirmed that these stones bore a refractive index consistent with high-grade emerald and garnet. Whatever chamber they were approaching was not simply a hiding place. It was crafted with intention, perhaps to hold something precious. The excavated wood pieces were equally compelling. Each plank carried a coating of hardened resin, still aromatic once warmed under the flood lamps. Carbon dating placed their origin somewhere between 1460 to 1620 CE, aligning with theories of European presence long before official records suggested settlement. The wood fibers had been flattened and carved into measured beams, proving this space was once a structured room or passageway, the architecture of mines determined to protect what they buried. With every new layer of evidence, the crew's heartbeat seemed to sync with the rhythm of the ground. Statistics rolled across monitors, density readings increasing by 18%, metallic trace levels spiking by 22%, void mapping revealing a chamber roughly 4.6 meters long. And with each data point, the line separating legend from truth began to dissolve. On the sixth night of analysis, a curious discovery emerged from a water pocket at 213 feet. A wooden chip painted with faded pigment. Though fragmented, the color still clung to its surface, an impossible survivor of time. Rick held it delicately, as if it might crumble beneath his breath, knowing it had once belonged to something ceremonial or decorative. A quiet hush fell over the cramped workspace. Even veteran diggers, who rarely showed emotion, paused, sensing that this was no simple storeroom of valuables. It felt sacred, protected by forces that defied ordinary explanation. The tunnel walls trembled slightly as machinery continued, and the droplets along the ceiling shimmered with vibration, as though the earth itself was alive and aware. Every discovery came with a strange feeling, not fear, but reverence. The money pit was no longer just a dig site. It felt like a threshold into a forgotten chapter of civilization. Then, just as the samples hinted at the unbelievable, the drill struck a layer of stone, so finely cut it reflected light in clean lines. This was no natural formation. Its face was smooth, almost polished, forming what looked like the upper edge of a concealed entryway. The team steadied, breath held tight, as they cleaned the surface and traced faint markings etched along its side. Markings too precise to be coincidence. Their hearts raced again, pushing them forward into the next breath of discovery, where a hidden chamber waited just beyond this silent stone. By the second week of February 2025, every reading pointed to a cavity somewhere beyond the newly exposed stone face. The team advanced with extreme precision, drilling millimeter by millimeter. The steel bit shivered as it pushed through layered sediment. Then suddenly, everything went silent. A hollow tone echoed upward. Rick froze. He knew instantly they had broken into open space. Flood lamps were lowered, their beams cutting through darkness trapped for centuries. As the shadows retreated, what lay beyond took their breath. The chamber was small, barely 5 meters long and just under 2 meters high, but its contents were unlike anything found on Oak Island before. The mud glimmered with flecks of gold, not scattered like chance, but settled around carved wooden chests, half buried in sediment. Gilded fragments, bent, cracked, but unmistakably precious, lay near the entrance, as if time itself had tried to push them away from view. Some pieces resembled decorative metalwork, etched with designs sharp enough to show under muddy water, while others seemed to belong to objects long lost to history. Rick climbed down carefully, boots sinking into cold silt. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that generations of searchers had dreamed of this very moment and never lived to see it. At his feet rested a sealed container, its edges wrapped in thick black pitch, likely applied to protect the contents from moisture. The casing was reinforced with hand-forged metal strips, remarkably intact despite the centuries. No one spoke. The tunnel felt too sacred for casual words. Beside it, resting against the chamber wall, lay a carved relic, a narrow wooden panel covered in faint, swirling patterns. Its craftsmanship was extraordinary, far beyond crude marking. Despite water damage, the carving still carried elegant curves and symbolic shapes that suggested meaning beyond decoration. Under the lamp's glow, Rick noticed inlaid traces of metal, possibly gold, still embedded in the grooves. When lifted, the piece weighed more than expected, nearly 12 kilograms, suggesting reinforced structure hidden within. Further inside, nestled beneath clay, were shards of deep red material. Under analysis later, their density readings would match those of garnet processed at a purity rate of 96%, far beyond what one might expect in a coastal hiding place. These weren't trinkets scattered by accident. Everything here had been placed with intention. This was no random storeroom. It felt ritual, purposeful. Even more astonishing was a cluster of small containers sealed with what looked like wax. Rick gently brushed away clay, revealing symbols cut into their lids, delicate lines meeting at precise intersections. Though their meaning remained unclear, the deliberate craftsmanship left no doubt that the people who sealed them believed deeply in whatever they contained. As the team catalogued what they could see, cameras recorded every inch. Temperature readings fell to 5 degrees Celsius, unusual for an enclosed space as though the chamber had been naturally chilled and preserved since its creation. Every breath Rick drew felt heavy with history. When he glanced back toward the tunnel entrance, he could see the faces of his team. Eyes wide, voices caught in disbelief. They weren't just looking at artifacts, they were staring at proof that the legend had always been real. Careful not to disturb the integrity of the chamber, Rick signaled for additional lighting, illuminating the far corner where a larger container rested beneath a shield of stone slabs. Their placement was too perfect to be random. It seemed designed to endure centuries underground. The air felt still, reverent, as the light passed over it, drawing them slowly forward into the next unstoppable surge of discovery, where every step promised a deeper truth, still waiting beyond the edge of the lamplight. One by one, the artifacts were lifted from the chamber with careful hands in late February 2025, each object carried as if it were alive. Rick Lagina positioned himself closest to the discovery site, gently brushing away wet clay as the first compartment yielded a cluster of ancient coins. Their surfaces, though dulled by centuries beneath water and sediment, were etched with fading symbols, patterns resembling crosses, curved blades, and crowned shapes that suggested a lineage older than written record on the island. Later testing indicated they were minted sometime between 1450 and 1680, their purity hovering near 91%, a statistic rarely seen in colonial circulation. These were not coins of trade, these were coins of significance. Next came jewelry tangled within a shroud of cold mud, bracelets adorned with twisted metalwork and inset stones, reflecting muted purple and deep blue. Their structure showed advanced craftsmanship, far beyond what early settlers could have produced. As Rick turned them in the beam of his headlamp, subtle designs revealed themselves, intersecting arcs and tiny carved figures, all meticulously placed. No two pieces matched. Each seemed to signify a different story, a different hand, a different purpose. The entire chamber felt alive with abandoned identity. Near the back of the space, tucked beneath a lattice of rotted timber, lay a series of sealed parchment bundles, protected with thick wax coats that had somehow survived the centuries. Under controlled conditions, Rick and his team eased them free and placed them into temperature-safe containers. Preliminary scans indicated dense writing across multiple sheets, the ink still visible in jagged looping strokes. Moisture damage was minimal, an astonishing less than 18% surface disruption, a miracle for documents buried more than 400 years. Whatever truths they held had been intentionally preserved. With every artifact lifted, Rick felt a growing weight settle inside him, a weight not of burden, but of reverence. These pieces were not simple treasure, they were testimonies. Testimonies of those who had walked Oak Island long before the world mapped its shores. The chamber did not feel like a vault of wealth. It felt like a repository of memory, a place where someone had chosen to hide fragments of their existence rather than let them be swallowed by time. As the chamber emptied, a final object revealed itself beneath a layer of compacted clay, a narrow metal tube, sealed and reinforced. Its surface bore faint embossments resembling floral curls. Nothing about it suggested utility. It was ceremonial. When Rick held it, the metal was colder than the surrounding air, though no water touched its surface. Instrument scans estimated a high content of gold mixed with copper alloys. Its weight, just over 3.9 kilograms, told the team that whatever lay inside was valuable enough to protect with every means available. Crates of catalogued items were raised slowly through the tunnel, secured by harnesses and tracked by laser measurement. Above ground, pale morning light spilled across each piece as it emerged, the cold air of Oak Island touching them for the first time since forgotten hands hid them away. There was a hush among the crew, not out of exhaustion, but out of respect. To touch objects older than the soil itself was to feel the pulse of an ancient voice speaking across centuries. No one could say what story the documents would tell, or why such treasure had been buried in this lonely place, yet everyone felt the same truth rising. History was no longer a whisper. It had surfaced in metal, ink, and stone, and it called them forward into a final revelation that waited just beyond the threshold of this moment, where victory began to take shape in the chilled air of dawn. The final stage of recovery began in the first days of March 2025, when the last artifacts were lifted from the Money Pit tunnel and the chamber lay silent once more. The torches flickered gently against the wet walls as Rick Lagina stepped forward, his boots sinking into soft sediment that had not been disturbed since the late 1600s. The chill inside the tunnel carried the weight of centuries, yet the air felt somehow lighter, as though the earth itself had exhaled after surrendering its greatest truth. Near the entrance of the chamber, half buried beneath a mat of clay and gravel, rested an object unlike anything recovered before, a golden relic, elegant yet rugged, shaped with curves that reflected both artistry and purpose. It was heavier than it looked, nearly 4.3 kilograms, dense with alloyed gold and copper, with faint etchings that caught the light in broken lines. Rick held it carefully with both hands, and for a moment, all noise faded. The artifact felt warm, as though it had stored the memory of those who placed it here. The team stood around him, exhausted yet unable to look away. After weeks of precision excavation, every fiber in their bodies ached, every tool lay streaked with clay, yet the sight of Rick holding that relic ignited something deeper than relief. It was validation. Generations of searchers, dating back to 1795, had risked everything for the truth buried beneath Oak Island. Now, at last, that truth rested in Rick's hands. Above ground, early daylight washed across the site, catching the moisture still clinging to the relic's surface. Cameras rolled, documenting every detail as Rick lifted it toward the light. The etchings, partially obscured by mineral deposits, seemed to trace symbols, circular forms intersecting in repeating patterns. Experts believed these marks might align with navigational or ceremonial scripts used between 1500 and 1700, though full analysis would take months. Statistics arriving from the testing tent confirmed the relic's extraordinary nature. The gold purity registered at 88%, with copper balancing the remainder, a composition rare for the region. More astonishing was the carbon residue found trapped in its seams, dated between 1520 and 1670, overlapping perfectly with the artifacts recovered earlier. Every result pointed to a deliberate act. Someone had placed this treasure here with intention, sealing it in the belly of the island for reasons still unknown. At the mouth of the tunnel, Rick paused, surrounded by crewmates whose faces carried streaks of mud and tears. The moment felt larger than any discovery before it. He looked down at the artifact, the culmination of a lifelong quest, and felt everything he had sacrificed converge into a single realization. The legend was no myth. The treasure was real. The money pit had finally spoken. Outside, as crates were loaded for transport, Rick stood still, absorbing the full weight of what lay before him. This was no simple find. It was history pulled from darkness, a narrative written in metal and stone, raised from a chamber that had waited centuries to be seen again. He could almost sense the voices of those who buried it, their intentions preserved, their message finally delivered. The world beyond Oak Island continued unaware, but here, beneath open skies, a dream had crossed into reality, guiding the next step of a journey that now refused to end.